Oh, hi, Tom. Okay. Our guest today, our speaker today is Kelvin Chin, who I met at the IANDS conference last year in Philadelphia. And he has a great book, Hi, Overcoming the Fear of Death. And it's a wonderful book. In fact, if we were having our live meetings, I would have a stack of them on the table. I have a bunch of people I would like to give a copy of the book to. And he had a near-death experience. What was it, 50 years ago?
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
And I'll let him explain in more detail. And he has two foundations. And he teaches people around the world about meditation and using meditation to help overcome the fear of death or other things. So I'll let Kelvin take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. It's great to be here with everybody. Thanks for having me, and it's great to see all the folks on live, and also greetings and hello and welcome to all the folks who are watching the recording afterwards. So yeah, as Beverly mentioned, she and I met in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia last year, August, right? August, September last year at the International IANDS conference. Yeah. And I was honored to be asked by the organizers to speak at that conference. I'd never been to an IANDS conference before. I'd been to some local IANDS meetings in Austin, Texas, where I used to live before I live here in Los Angeles, California now. But I used to live in Austin, Texas, so I was familiar with IANDS, but I'd never been to a conference before. That was the first time, and then I was asked to speak, be the opening night speaker on that Thursday evening. So we met, Beverly and I met there. As she mentioned, I have had my own NDE, which is a little bit unusual, and I'll describe it to you in a minute. Unusual, they're all unusual. An NDE is unusual. I just get that out of the way. But my NDE, I always say, as compared to what? My NDE was a little bit even more unusual than, the classic, we call it, I call it in my book, I call it the classic, there's classic NDEs, and I don't need to tell you folks about NDEs. Many of you probably had them yourself, or at least known people who've had them. But I'll describe to you mine in a minute. But just to I'll go 100,000 foot with you first. So as Beverly mentioned, I've been meditating for a long time. I've been practicing meditation. This is my 51st year, just started a few weeks ago. November 2nd was my anniversary for learning to meditate 50 years ago. And back then, this was 1970, I learned. Back then, I learned transcendental meditation. So TM, many of you probably have heard of it. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi brought that out to the West, out of India, in the late 50s, 1959, I believe is when he came out to the West and started teaching it. He didn't even call it TM back then. He didn't even call it transcendental meditation. He just called it meditation. But then he came up with that name in the 60s, at some point in the 1960s. He's the guy, he's the Indian guru who taught the Beatles to meditate, etc., a few years before I learned. I was an international leader in his organization for about 10 years. Then I moved away from it when they went off in a different direction, and I decided to stay focused on teaching meditation, and they got into other things. So I still give Maharishi credit, however, for being the spiritual revolutionary that he still is, that he was and still is over many lifetimes, the guy who's come in and kind of shaken things up spiritually a little bit. And in this case, he said meditation can be easy. It does not have to involve focus or control or concentration or clearing the mind. And he showed us how that could be. And so I've taken the technique, I've made it even easier. I've removed all the cultural associations with the way I teach the technique over the last, what I've been teaching meditation for 47 years. So about over the last 30 years, I've removed all the cultural associations with it or from it, because I teach, as Beverly said, I teach worldwide, 44 countries so far across the world, both not only teaching meditation, but helping people with NDEs, near-death experiences, the trauma sometimes is associated with near-death experiences that doesn't get talked about a lot, the anxiety that sometimes get kicked out. Sometimes, as you guys know, you folks know, the NDEs can get rid of anxieties about fears about death and dying, but they can also exacerbate fears that some people have, and some people are traumatized by NDEs actually as well. So I work with the whole range of people who feel comfortable with it and they want to understand more about the afterlife and so forth. And also the other spectrum, the other end of the spectrum of people who may be traumatized by having had an NDE that was a little bit shocking to them for various reasons. I'll give you just a quick anecdote. For example, I helped a client of mine from Mexico who had 4 NDEs, 4 near-death experiences, not all in a row, but 4 different times he had near-death experiences. One related to his heart. I can't remember the other, all the others, but the 4th one that he had was related to a fire he was in, where he was burning. He was in his RV, driving his RV, and in the RV engine. Those of you who own RVs or ever been in one, they're like vans in the sense, the old style van where the engine is right underneath you, basically, And so the engine caught on fire while he was driving in Mexico, and now his feet and his legs, and he started burning, basically. So he had all these 3rd-degree burns. Of course, extremely painful. He was, obviously somebody pulled him out of the burning RV, and he was in the hospital, and he told me that he was in a coma for 7 weeks in the hospital. They put him into a medically induced coma because of the pain and to try to accelerate his healing, etc. And then about 6 or 7 weeks after that, he said he found me on the internet and contacted me. So the bottom line is, here's somebody who had 4 NDEs, and one of them was very traumatic because of the nature of the NDE. So I helped him get through the stress and the anxiety of that. So I help people across the world, different cultures, different religions, different belief systems. It doesn't matter to me. I help everybody get through whatever the challenge is that they're going through. And so some people don't have any fears of death and dying or issues around death and dying who I help. They may just have anxiety issues. Or I teach meditation to people who don't have either anxiety issues or fears about death or dying. Maybe they're just athletes and they want to get back on the playing field faster and accelerate their healing and all that kind of thing. So I teach people, I've been teaching for 47 years and thousands of people around the world. But today, what we're going to focus on is my experiences and my knowledge about the afterlife. And today we're going to talk about these 12 principles that I've come up with. I call them the 12 afterlife principles. And we're going to talk about this and open it up for discussion and Q&A, of course. But I'll go through and kind of outline them and describe them to you first. Just another quick background on myself. In addition to the meditation experiences, I've had over the last 50 years, about 43, 44, 45 years ago, I started opening up and having past life memories. And again, this was just a spontaneous experience. I've never, to this day, I've never had a past life regression or anything like that. I just have so many memories that have just popped up in and of themselves, by themselves, since 1977. So right now, the current count is around 25-ish lifetimes, memories from different amounts of memories. It varies from about 25 different lifetimes that stretch back about 6,000 years. So that's just started spontaneously happening again in the mid late 70s, 1970s. And then in the mid 1980s, I spontaneously opened up and started communicating with beings on the other side and so forth. Angels, archangels, dead people who I did know, and dead people who I had never knew before would communicate with me, etc. And that's continued to present day as well. Before I get into the afterlife principles, let me just describe to you my NDE, since this is the, an IANDS group. Let me just describe to you my NDE that was a little bit unusual. What happened was I was 20 years old at the time this happened. In fact, you guys are in San Diego. That's when this NDE happened. It happened, I was in San Diego at the time. So Beverly knows, I think, that I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. I was born in Boston, grew up in a suburb of Boston. I went to school in New Hampshire at Dartmouth College. You may have heard of that school. And but I went to UCSD for a summer program when I was 20 years old. And and they still have this unique arrangement. I don't know why, but whatever. Some administrators probably went from one school to the other, and then they got this arrangement. Dartmouth and UCSD, so La Jolla campus, have this unique relationship where the credits are completely transferable from whatever you take at UCSD to Dartmouth and back and forth. It's like, you don't have to like jump through any hoops. It's just literally, it's just like, oh, I want to go to USD. Okay, go. And you go, and then the credits just transfer seamlessly back and forth. It's highly unusual. I don't know. This started happening in the 60s, the late 60s, I think. For some reason, who knows? Probably the current administrators of both schools are probably too young to understand why it is, but it is. So I went to UCSD for a summer because I thought, wow, San Diego, I've never been to the West Coast before. I'll go to San Diego. It looks like a beautiful campus in the pictures that I've seen. And I went to the summer program there to study Chinese intensively. So I was in an 8-week Chinese program that was the equivalent of a 1-year program. So that's how intense it was in 8 weeks. I was a French major at Dartmouth, and then I started studying Chinese. Now, you may look at me and you look at my name, C-H-I-N, you probably can kind of guess that you put an A on the end of my name, it's probably a good guess of what my ethnicity is, right? So, but I grew up, those of you who have any friends who are like my generation, who are 60, 70 years old, our parents did not want us to speak English. That generation did not want us to speak English with an accent. So they did not teach us Chinese. There's millions of Chinese Americans who don't know how to speak Chinese, who are 50 to 80 years old, probably. Because that generation of parents, our parents, did not want us, they wanted us to assimilate. So it was this whole assimilation thing after the Second World War and everything. So I didn't know how to speak Chinese. So I thought, I got to take another language. I'll learn Chinese. So I started taking Chinese at Dartmouth. So I took Chinese and I came to UCSD La Jolla, intensive Chinese program. So keep in mind, what's the important part of this story right now is the fact that I'd never been to California before. I've never been on the West Coast, never been to San Diego before. So I'm at registration up at, UCSD campus in La Jolla, a beautiful June day. And I'm, registering, standing in line, blah, blah, blah. You start talking to people in line. And there's this girl. She's a girl. She was like 18, 19, 20 years old like I was. And she's there and we're chatting. And she says, oh, I go to Mount Holyoke in Massachusetts. I said, oh, I go to Dartmouth. Oh, I've been to Mount Holyoke a million times. Okay, great. So we strike up a conversation. Turns out she's in the same Chinese program I'm in at UCSD, because there's a whole bunch of summer programs going on. We're in the same class, same group of 20 of us. She's one of the 20. And so I said, hey, so what are you doing after registration? You want to go to the beach? She says, yeah, let's go to the beach. She's from the East Coast. I'm from the East Coast. We don't know San Diego Ocean, right? So we go down there, and I don't know if you guys have ever been up there. It's probably the same route to get from UCSD campus down to the ocean. It's a very close walk, right? And there's this driveway or an access road, that goes down. So we're walking down this access road to like Black's Beach, Black's Beach, that section of, right there. And of course, you guys know Black's Beach, and I think Black's Beach is probably the same as it was in 1970, 72 when I was there, but we didn't know. But anyway, we didn't go there. We go to Black's Beach, and you know what I mean. Anyway, but we go down to Black's Beach, but we have our bathing suits on and everything. And we go down, and there's nobody there. It's a beautiful June day, and it's 2:00 in the afternoon, and it's vacant. There's no human beings there but the two of us, okay? So we go, wow, this is gorgeous. Wow, never been to a California beach before. This is beautiful. So we go out there, and it's a hot day, so first thing you want to dunk underwater, right? And so we're walking down, and we go down there, and she's standing there about maybe 15 feet away from me. And I'm standing in about, maybe waist deep water. And I pick my feet up to dunk underwater, right? I start seeing those 300-foot high cliffs at Torrey Pines Beach there, right? Start going like this. I'm getting pulled out by a rip current. Right? Rip current's pulling me out. So you guys live in San Diego, there's rips all up and down the coast, rip currents. They're everywhere and off of the coast of California. Neither of us have ever been here before. And I see her, she's tiny now. I talked to a friend of mine, and so I'm freaking out, okay? I am in freak out mode. I think I'm gonna die, all right? And I talked to a friend of mine who's a merchant seaman. He was, captain of a ship, these commercial ships. His name is Cayman. And I say, Cayman, those 300-foot high cliffs were about 3 or 4 inches tall. How far out was I? He said, you were 1.7 miles out. I was 1.7 miles out in about 30 or 40 seconds, maybe. Really fast. I could see it getting smaller. That's how fast I could see it getting smaller. It was like, and I was freaking out. So of course, what do? I forget, because I'm panicking, I forget all of my Boy Scout training. So just a little tip for if this ever happens to you, you do not do what I did. You do not swim back into the beach. You go like this. You swim at an angle to the beach, which is, I knew this from Boy Scout training, but I completely panicked and forgot. And you do that at a 45-degree angle to the beach because you don't want to swim directly back into the rip current that just pulled you out, right? You want to try to get out of the current, so you swim in an angle to increase the likelihood that you're going to get out of it. So I'm swimming straight into the current, panicking, and I'm getting exhausted because I'm going nowhere, or I'm actually starting to get pulled out even farther, okay? So now I'm exhausted, and I start going down underwater. Just like in the movies you start seeing the water is here, the surface of the water is here, and now it's here, and now it's here, and now it's, the water. I'm going down because I am so exhausted. But then what happened was I left my body. So, like in the NDE, right? So this is where I'm saying this is not like a classic NDE. It's a little bit different. There's a whole range of NDEs you guys probably know, right? So I leave my body, but because I had been meditating for 2 years already before this happened, I think in retrospect, Monday morning quarterbacking, I think that saved my life, because I decided, no, I can go right back in and calm myself down. I had this it wasn't like a whole bunch of series of thoughts. This was like one thought that happened all at once in a split second. You know, I left my body and I realized I was leaving my body, and then I went right back in, but I was not unfamiliar. That was familiar. The leaving of my body was familiar from the meditation. That was not unfamiliar to me, to have a separation of mind and body through 2 years of meditation. So it didn't freak me out. I was freaked out about drowning. So what it did was it reminded me that I could go right back into my body. I could will myself back into my body and then calm myself down, which is what I did. I said, don't try. I said to myself, the only thought that I remember that I had from back then was that don't panic, don't rush. And so I did not rush in. I took my time, and then that saved my life. So I kept my head above water, and then I swam in. It took me an hour to get in, and I crawled up on the beach. My friend stayed to watch me to make sure she didn't lose sight of me. And she said I passed out for about a half an hour. It took me an hour to swim in, she said. She said it was about an hour for me to swim in. So that was my nearing death experience, where I started to leave my body and I willed myself back in. So it wasn't the classic that you hear about, oh, you know, you saw Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad or whatever, or the angels or God or somebody greeted me. You know, those are like classic, or my friend I talk about in my book that Beverly showed you in my book. In my book, I tell one about my friend Henry, who was on the ceiling of his living room while his 8-year-old body was hemorrhaging. He told me this when we were in college. And, you know, his body was hemorrhaging, and he was unconscious, but he was conscious. His mind was, his consciousness, his mind was on the ceiling watching himself. So that's another more classic near-death experience, although he didn't feel like he went to heaven or the other side or whatever, but that's more classic than what I experienced, was just a leaving of my body and then a willing of myself back in while my body was underwater going down. And then I struggled to get the 4 or 5 feet or whatever it was back up to the surface because I was so exhausted. It really took all my energy to get back up. So that was my NDE, a little bit of a different one, but one of the reasons that I tell it the way I do is to shine a light on the power of meditation, because it saved my life. I think the power of knowing, of getting the familiarity of the experience of separation of mind and body. In my case, it was through meditation, because those of you who have had NDEs yourself and have not meditated before you had the NDE, you know that that's obviously a hallmark of the NDE experience, the near-death experience, is the separation of mind and body. And if you don't have that familiarity with that on a regular basis, you're like, whoa, you know, when you have the NDE, it's a mind-blowing, you know, experience, obviously, right? Whereas in my case, it wasn't, because I had all that experience with meditation. I think this is Monday morning quarterbacking. I think that's why it didn't shock me when I left my body like that, you know? So anyway, that was my NDE experience off the shores of where many of you are very close to probably where you guys live. So anyway, let's talk about these 12 afterlife principles and then open it up for Q&A and so forth, and any questions. And you can ask me questions about anything related to the afterlife, because I go there. I not only have had communications, but I can go there without dying. I can go there, you know, as Kelvin Chin, without, you know, I can just be there sometimes. And also without leaving my body. Sometimes I leave my body in my dreams and so forth, or sleeping at night and go the other side, but sometimes even in waking state. So you can ask me questions about anything related to the afterlife. But let me give you these 12 principles, and then I'll come back and I'll talk about each one a little bit, okay? So I'll just list the 12 principles that I've come up with, 12 afterlife principles. First one, the other side is more like this side than we realize. That's principle number one. Second principle, It's right here. It's right here. We just can't see it. Number 3, we are all energy on this side and the other side. It's another third principle. 4th principle, we take our minds with us. We take whatever mind we have with us. Number 5, the minds there on the other side, the minds there are like minds here. Number 6, don't believe everything you hear from the other side. Emphasis on everything you hear from the other side. Next one, all minds have free will. All minds, this side and the other side, have free will. Another one, time and space exists on the other side. Biological bodies age, it's another one. Biological bodies age on this side. Energy bodies do not age on the other side. Okay? There's another one. Identifiable energy pattern. We all have an identifiable energy pattern on the other side. Here's the, I think we're up to 11 now. 11th one, nothing is meant to be. Nothing is meant to be. Absolutely meant to be. So when I say that, I mean absolutely meant to be. Number 12, no rewards or punishment on the other side. Okay, those are 12 principles that I've come up with. I could probably come up with 20, but these, and I kind of distill them down to those 12. And the reason that I like to talk about, you know, a discrete number, you know, a finite number of principles, is to talk about them. Why? To give each of ourselves a little bit of information that we can then draw from that principle and apply in other situations. Because that's, to me, that's what a principle means. A principle means that it's a fundamental principle, and if you understand that fundamental principle, you can apply it in other situations and kind of figure things out for yourself, you know, based on those fundamental principles. So the first one, let's talk about this. Other side is more like this side. Well, obviously the other side is different from this side in obvious ways, right? We don't have a physical biological body over there, et cetera, et cetera. So what I mean is, you know, it's energy over there and so forth. But there are general principles that apply on this side that also apply on the other side that I think sometimes get overlooked by people, because people generally, I think, assume the opposite. They assume that the other side is completely different from this side. And it's true that there are incredible differences. Like I just said, no physical biological bodies, no physical dense structures on the other side. Yes, but there's more similarities than we realize. And I think if we keep that principle in mind, you can answer a lot of your own questions about the other side by applying that principle. This other principle I talk about, the one where I say it's right here. It's right here. It's just functioning and vibrating at a different frequency than what we're functioning and vibrating at here on physical planet Earth right now. You know, we have a more slowed down, denser vibration going on. And that, you know, I hit my body and it feels like it's solid. You know, you and I know from science that it's made up of atoms and molecules and and therefore we could call it energy. Well, on the other side, we don't have that density, okay? But it's there. It's right here. We just don't see it because it's vibrating in a different frequency. We're all energy, this side and the other side. So just a reminder, this is nothing new to you folks. You know, that we're energy. We are energy life forms living in a physical, biological vehicle that we call our bodies. And so the energy, we're energy on the other side without the biological body, obviously. And we take our minds with us. What does that mean? That means that we take our minds with us. That means when we die, when we physically, biologically die, our mind is still the same mind we take with us. We don't lose our identity. We don't lose our memories. We don't lose our personality, our basic makeup. that individual, that's what, most of us usually call our individuality. We keep that with us. We take that with us after we physically, biologically die. So those of you who've had NDEs, from your own experience in an NDE, when you've had the NDE, if you've had the more classic NDE, different from my drowning one, you're almost drowning. Thank you, I didn't drown. But you've had a more classic NDE, that you take your mind with you and you come back, obviously, if you've had the NDE, you've come back and you don't necessarily come back and go, oh, I've completely forgotten who I am. No, there is an individuality that continues. And I tell people who have not had NDEs, I tell them it's like waking up in the morning. You go to sleep at night, you go off in your dreams and you're dreaming and you're all over the place in your dreams. Who knows what you're doing and where you're doing it and who you're doing it with. But, you wake up in the morning, you don't have an identity crisis every morning when you wake up. I'm not sitting on the edge of my bed going, oh my God, how did I get here? Who am I? And what am I doing here? No, there's a continuation of our identity. That's what I mean. Our individuality. We remember who we are. It's the same thing. You guys have had NDEs. You folks who have had NDEs, you're on the other side. You're communicating with angels or Jesus or whoever, or your dead grandmother or loved ones or whatever. And, or maybe your spiritual teacher. People will communicate with different people when they have NDEs sometimes on the other side. But, it's you experiencing that. You're still that individual mind, okay? We take our minds with us. And the minds there are like the minds here in the sense that they also have hopes, dreams, and expectations and are making decisions, and they have different belief systems. There's not one monolithic belief system on the other side. There's as many, probably even more belief systems on the other side as there are here. So the minds there are very similar to the minds here in that respect. When I say the principle, don't believe everything you hear from the other side, the emphasis is on everything. Yeah, you can believe some of the stuff you hear from the other side, for sure. Some of it's very valuable, very helpful information, but don't blindly believe everything. That's what I really mean, is don't just blindly listen and believe everything that anybody ever tells you, whether it's a psychic, a medium, or whether you yourself directly communicate with a dead loved one or a spiritual teacher or an angel or whatever communicates directly with you. My encouragement to everybody is always filter, filter, filter. Use your filtration, meaning filter through your own mind, your common sense. Does it make sense? And so forth. And is it useful? Even if it's accurate, is it useful for me right now? It may not be useful for me. You need to make that decision. Don't just blindly follow what a psychic tells you or a medium or what you get communicated, what you may receive from communication wise from the other side yourself directly even. Always filter, okay? Because they have their own filtration system going on themselves. As I said, they have their own belief systems, their way of thinking, and so forth and so on. Another principle, all minds have free will. What do I mean by free will? Free will is just a simple, fancy, philosophical, metaphysical term for personal choice. That's all that means, okay? Free will means personal choice. So do you have personal choice in life? Yeah, we all do. We all have personal choice. Now you may say, well, I don't have personal choice when the cop pulls me over and gives me the ticket for running the red light that I wasn't paying any attention to. I don't have any choice there. I got to take, yeah, okay, I get it. There are rules in our society that we need to follow, et cetera, and we, may not have choice in that respect. But what I'm talking about from a spiritual standpoint or a more mental standpoint, do we have choice? Yes, we always have choice. And so, for example, in the cop giving me a ticket, it's actually a true story. It happened. I didn't run the red light, but I was in a school zone where the school zone sign was hidden behind a tree, and the school was set back from the street, and you couldn't even see the school. So I got a ticket for being in a school zone. So technically, they were right. I was wrong. It was, the sign was hidden behind a tree. You couldn't see it, and in the schoolyard was not visible from the street. But I was wrong. Okay. So did I have a choice there? No. I got the ticket, and I had to go to traffic court and all that stuff. But here's the choice I do have. I always have free will choice to get angry or not angry, to get frustrated about this. And how do I process that? Okay. That's what I mean when I say mentally, emotionally, spiritually, we always have free will. We always have choice in anything in life. Okay. So same thing on the other side is the point. After we physically, biologically die, free will still exists on the other side. People are making choices. Minds, because some beings on the other side have never been people before. They've never been incarnated in physical form, but they exist on the other side. So we'll just say minds, consciousnesses. By the way, step back for a second. When Kelvin Chin, when you hear me use the word mind, you can substitute the word soul, spirit, consciousness, awareness. They're all synonyms from my standpoint, okay? But you'll hear me use the word mind because I'm talking about big mind. I'm talking about our waking state mind, making decisions, moving my hands around like this. And also my vast mind, and each of us has a vastness of our minds, okay? So when you can use soul, spirit, whatever. But I use the word mind because I work across so many cultures and so many religions and belief systems. I want to use language that doesn't trigger anybody, and also English language that is easily understood, because I work with a lot of people that English is not their first language, okay? So again, we all have free will. The minds on the other side have free will to make their own choices as well, okay? Another principle that I mentioned, time and space still exists on the other side. This is something that you hear of a lot of disagreement about in spiritual circles. People will say, no, time does not exist on the other side. And I'll say, okay, well, give me an example. What happened? And very often it'll go something like this. Well, I was over, I had an NDE on the other side, and they showed me this. They showed me my life review or whatever, or they did, so far, because obviously the person came back. But, or they took me, and then all of a sudden we were off in this other place, in like a split second later, we're in this other place, so forth. So people describe things like this, examples like that, and then they'll conclude from that time doesn't exist on the other side. And I say, no. Understand what's the definition of time. The accepted definition of time in the English language, planet Earth, science, time is a measurement of change. That's what time is. So very often people have a misunderstanding. They think time is something that humans make up and that it's a subjective experience. Well, we can have a subjective experience of time, yes, but time is a measurement of change. That's the definition of time. So does change exist on the other side? Yeah, obviously it exists. Those of you who've had NDEs know that change exists on the other side. If there was no change, there would be no individual beings on the other side. And obviously you've had NDEs, you've had communications, or if you had any psychic medium experiences, whatever, there's individual beings on the other side. Individuality must exist in the field of change. That's a given, okay? That's a fundamental principle of physics. That's just given. Well, if there's individuality, then there's change. If there's change, then time exists. But the experience of time, the subjective experience of time, can be all over the map, all right? And on the other side, the experience of time is very different from our experience of time on planet Earth. So over there, you can travel really, really fast. I know that. I don't know how fast, but really fast. Why? I think because we're energy. We don't have a biological body that's got to get in a car or an airplane or a bus or a train and to go someplace fast or even to run. You just think and then boom, there you are. All right, because we are minds, consciousness, soul, spirit, energy on the other side. And so I think that's where a lot of confusion can arise. And so where people will say, well, but I was here and I was there, you're energy, but time still exists because change still exists. You were an individual on the other side. You had individual experience. That means you're in the field of change. Time is not a subjective experience. It can be experienced subjectively. That's two different things. All right. So I thought about this and I thought, how can I give people an example of what I mean by this? And I thought, well, if we're energy on the other side, what can we measure on this side that's also energy? And I thought, light. We know how fast the speed of light is on this side, okay? The speed of light, I looked it up, and I'll round it off for you, okay? I looked up the speed of light. I'll round it off. It's about 700 million miles per hour. That's the speed of light. It's like stupid crazy fast, right? 700 million miles per hour is the speed of light. Well, I don't know if on the other side we can travel at the speed of light, but let's just say that we can. Maybe we can travel at half the speed of light. That's, oh, excuse me, you can only go 350 million miles per hour. Whatever it is, it's like crazy fast. And to give you an idea of how fast that is on this side, if you can travel at the speed of light, 700 million miles per hour, to go around planet Earth at the equator, you can get around the equator 8 times in 1 second. That's 700 million miles per hour. 1/8 of a second to get around planet Earth at the equator, right? That's how fast. So you could also see how this notion, which I think is an incorrect notion based on time being defined as a measurement of change, clearly change exists on the other side. You can also see, I'll give you another example of how the confusion could arise. Let's say my son, I mentioned to you guys earlier, my son's 32 years old now, and he's an actor. And my daughter is 26 years old. Let's say my son is acting in Tokyo, Japan, and my daughter's in Paris, France. Let's just say, okay? I have died. I am on the other side. And I come to communicate with my son in Tokyo. And I say, Daddy loves you, Jesse. Daddy loves you so much. I miss you, da, da, da. And then immediately I go over to my daughter, hey, in Paris, France, and I say, honey, Daddy loves you. I miss you so much. Daddy loves you. And so immediately they call each other up. All right? They're on their cell phones. They call each other up. Daddy just talked to me. No, Daddy just talked to me. Well, Daddy could be in both 2 places at the same time. No. If I could travel at the speed of light, again, I don't know if this is factually accurate. Haven't done the stopwatch thing on the other side. But, let's just say 700 million miles per hour, I could travel that fast. Tokyo to Japan in 1/32nd, I think it's 1/32nd. It's a 1/32nd of a second. 1/32nd of a second is how fast I could travel those 6,000 miles, okay? If I travel at the speed of light. So you can see how people would have these experiences, and they're very real, genuine, accurate experiences, and yet misinterpret them based on just, the facts as we just laid them out, okay? So time and space do exist on the other side, just in a very, very different way. The subjective experience of time, it's like if I go to Hawaii and I'm on vacation, you've ever been on vacation somewhere and a week goes by and you go, where did the week go? Time still exists while you're on vacation, but your subjective experience of it is very different, right? From when you're grinding it out at home, doing the daily grind, going to work, punching the clock, whatever, okay? That's a subjective experience of time. That does not mean that time did not exist in Hawaii when I was on the beach. We have an expression in English. We say it's as if time stood still. the key words in there is as if. Time didn't stand still. It's as if it did. All right. Not the same as actual stood still. All right. So again, another principle I talk about, biological bodies age on this side. Energy bodies don't age on the other side, because sometimes I help people, another group of people I help are parents who have lost loved ones, or anybody who's lost loved ones for that matter. But there's two particular international parent groups that I help. And so they wonder if their child is still growing and aging, and because sometimes they have infants who've died, or a 20-year-old that died, or whatever, and and it may have been 5, 10, 20 years later, and they wonder, and the body, we can take on any physical form that we want on the other side, because we are minds. We can now, not a physical form like biological physical form, but an energetic form, which takes me to my next principle, the idea of the identifiable energy pattern. And so we can take on an I came up with this phrase, identifiable energy pattern. Why? Because my experience is, and those of you who've had NDEs and experience, loved ones or spiritual beings on the other side, you can identify who they are. That's an identifiable energy pattern. They're not a biological body anymore on the other side, but they have an energy pattern that is identifiable. You recognize who they are, okay? So I've had experiences, for example, as I mentioned to you guys earlier, I studied personally with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in 1971 and 1973. And as I said, I was an international leader in his organization for about 10 years. So I was with him in his room many times. So I recognize what he looks like, how he sounds, what his energy feels like, etc. Well, he has come to visit me. He died in 2008. And so he has visited me many times since 2008. And sometimes I've seen his energy pattern, his energy form. He's showed me. Now, how does he come to me? He shows me a 1970s version of himself, because that's when I was with him. And I left his organization in the early 1980s. So I don't know him when he was 60, 70, 80. He died in his 90s. I know him when he was in his 50s. So that's the physical, physical, not biological, physical energy body that I see that reminds me of his biological body that I used to know, okay? I have memory of. Very often that can happen with you as well, with loved ones from the other side, showing you their identifiable energy pattern in a form that you recognize, okay? That can happen. Or their voice, or their cologne, that special perfume that your grandmother always wore too much of. One of my friends, grandmother, oh, it's too much. And we always knew it was, and you would wake up in the morning and your room reeks of that perfume. Clearly your grandmother's perfume. That's a visitation from the other side, but that's an identifiable energy pattern in the form of perfume of that person, you see? Okay. Another principle before we open up in a minute to questions. Nothing is meant to be. What do I mean by that? Nothing is absolutely meant to be. This is the idea of destiny, that predestination, that we don't have free will, that everything is figured out already, and God or some gods or being, knows this. It's already figured out. And then why would you even bother to live life? And so people would say that to me. And I said, no. You bother to live life to enjoy it and to play and be creative with life. That's why you do that. To me, that's the pursuit of happiness. And nothing is meant to be. My experience on the other side with some very, very powerful spiritual beings who've wanted to make certain things happen on planet Earth have not been able to do that. Because why? Because we mess things up, because there's billions of us making free will choices all the time, okay? And so free will is what is the principle that exists. This principle of absolute predestination, this meant to be idea, there's only might to be, is what I say. I came up with this phrase, that nothing is meant to be, everything is just might to be. In other words, there are probabilities of things happening. Can you more likely make something happen by getting together with certain person or people and so forth in relationships and try to make that happen and become a long-term loving committed relationship? Absolutely, yes. Yes. Can you even make decisions before you come in, and soul plans and soul contracts before you come in with that person and come in and try to? Yes, you can do that. Is it absolutely guaranteed it will work? No. The key word is absolute. So it's probabilities. Can we try to create these? Yes. And I encourage us to do that, to think strategically and to do these things. But don't be disheartened if things don't absolutely always work out the way you like it. Because we know from living life already, however many years that you've been on planet Earth, this lifetime, you know that everything does not always absolutely work out the way you want it to. That's because the free will minds of millions of other people are influencing your choices in ways, in sometimes very, 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 very indirect ways that you're completely unaware of. Look, how many people in Congress do I know personally? Zero. I know zero people in Congress, in the United States Congress, those of you in the United States who are listening. Zero. I know zero of them. Do they influence my life? Absolutely. They make laws and da-da-da-da. How many of do I know personally in the state of California? Politicians, legislators, zero. Do they influence my life? Absolutely. Does that affect my free will choices that I'm making? Yes. So I don't have control over that, is my point. We don't have control over millions, trillions of minds we don't have control over, if you include the dogs and the animals and the cats and everybody, when I say trillions, because they're making choices too. Those of you who have pets, they make choices, and some of the choices they're not making because they get sick and that's not a choice they're making, but it affects your life and so forth. All of these minds are making choices. That's free will. So nothing is absolutely meant to be, but we can create our own destiny along the way. So that's those through our free will choices. Absolutely, yes, we can do that. And the last point is no rewards or punishment. There's no rewards and punishment system on the other side. Those of you who have had NDEs, many of you have come back and you tell all of us, here, there's no punishment. God told me, or Jesus, or the angels told me. It's like there's no punishment on the other side. There's no structural punishment. So I use the word structural punishment like hell is a structural place of punishment in people's belief system. So that is made up. That if you want, I can tell you about the history of that, but we don't need to get into that right now unless you're curious. But it's ancient, it's old, and it's made up by humans, and it's not part of the Bible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there is no structural punishment on the other side. But there's also no structural rewards. So this whole idea of karma and building up good karma and creating piles of bad karma that are millions of miles high that you can never get rid of. All of that is also made up. There are theories that were created about 10,000 years ago, according to conversations I've had with the people who made up those theories, in order to help move things along. They did not realize at the time that it would get conflated and confused and turn into this whole fear-based process. All right? So again, no rewards or punishment. There's no magical cosmic accounting system going on. Now, there are consequences to our actions. Absolutely, there are consequences, but nobody's keeping tabs in that way. Okay? So there you go. Those are the 12 afterlife principles that I've come up with to kind of help us apply in different situations, to help us, each of us, figure out things ourselves. Because I'm all about empowerment. I'm a teacher with trying to empower people who I share my ideas with to be more powerful themselves, to make their own decisions as they go through life, this lifetime and many other lifetimes, going forward for eternity. So there you go. Feel free, questions, anything about anything that I've talked about, or questions about things I haven't talked about. Either way.
This is Rosary talking.
Yes.
And I'm interested in the soul and the soul growth. And it's my understanding that you can incarnate into, your soul can incarnate into several physical bodies at the same time here on Earth. Is that true?
That has not been my experience, and it's not been my it's not my knowledge based on all the conversations that I've had with thousands of beings on the other side. Okay. I've heard that. I've also heard this idea about twin flames and splitting souls and that. No, our mind, our soul, our consciousness is, my experience is it's eternal. And that that there's no creation, no destruction, no beginning and end. It's eternal. It's forever. And that it has existed. Now, we have not always existed as humans. Okay, my Kelvin Chin is not always, not even Kelvin Chin, but the soul that is currently incarnated as Kelvin Chin now in 20th and 21st century has not always been human form either, but there has been an essence of that has existed before as well. That's the eternal part that I'm talking about. But no, my experience, Rosemary, is not that that's the case, that the splitting thing or this multiple into multiple souls, our consciousness into multiple souls. Sometimes I think some of that might, the confusion might come from, we have certain connections with other minds, I call them minds, but souls here on planet Earth that's incredibly connected. I'm like uncannily connected and so forth. But I don't think that is because it's a splitting of two souls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
not my experience. Yeah.
Twins, let's say twin sisters, they would have separate souls.
Yeah, separate souls, but unbelievably connected sometimes. Now, I have friends who are twins who are not that connected too, right?
Right.
So, soul-wise, I'm talking about in terms of mentally, right? Emotionally and psychically, not very connected. So not all fraternal, what they call them, fraternal twins, I guess. I get confused, but you know what I mean. Not all biological twins. Not all biological twins are psychically connected. So sometimes people think that all twins are connected. No, some of them are, some of them aren't. So
identical twins might be.
Yeah, maybe more so. I don't know. I've known some identical twins though that have not been.
Okay.
Yeah. So that to me is more evidence that the souls are separate. You know what I mean? That the mind is separate.
Yes.
Notwithstanding what the body is doing.
Okay. It's not a physical thing. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Other questions? Other questions? Let's see. Did you have a question, Beverly? No? Yeah. So let me give you an example, and you guys can, if you have other questions, feel free to, ask them. Let me give you an example of soul plans or soul contracts and how free will enters the mix there. All right. Let's just say, Beverly, I'm going to pick on you because, you and I, we've talked before and so forth. So I'm going to pick on you. So let's say Beverly and I have a soul contract on the other side before we're born this lifetime. All right. We have a soul plan or a soul contract on the other side. And we get together on the other side and say, hey, Beverly, when we, or whatever I'm calling you, you may not have been called Beverly at the time, you know what I mean? But like I said, we have an identifiable energy pattern. So I recognize you on the other side, okay? And then and whatever I'm calling you, whatever, let's go down this time and let's try to get together in elementary school and be friends. All right? Let's be friends in elementary school and see what happens. Like, and just grow up together and have fun and so forth. We just have a little soul contract like that. So it's just kind of like a, basic soul contract. Get together, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that's in my story, the teaching story here, that really exists, let's just say. Then I say, hey, look, there's a good family down there. And I'll go down to that family because they're in the same town. So the likelihood of us probably ended up in the same elementary school is really, it's a small town. They only have one school. Let's go down there. So you go down there first, boom, and you're in the womb, your soul is in the body, and your mom is pregnant, blah, blah, blah. And then I go down. Okay. And my mom's pregnant. And I'm, my soul is down in there in the body, my consciousness, whatever. All right. And we're growing. Okay, great. Now, my dad gets a phone call from his boss. And his boss says, Henry, that was my dad's name. Henry, Raytheon, my dad worked for Raytheon. Raytheon corporate, not my decision, but corporate said they were looking at your background and they really need a senior engineer to move over here to this other plant over here in this other town or this other state or this other country or whatever, fill in the blank, right? And then now, Beverly, you and I, we're not in the same little town anymore. Now we're like, I'm on the other side of the planet, or who knows where. Maybe it's just a couple towns away, but we're not growing up in the same elementary school. We're not going to the same elementary school. We're not in the same neighborhood anymore, right? Why? Because my dad's boss's boss, who may be controlled by the board of directors of Raytheon, which is a Fortune 50 company, huge corporation, global corporation, decided that, all right, these guys, I need 50 of these kinds of engineers over in this area. And my dad's one of the 50, and boom, okay? But we had a soul contract that got disrupted by the free will choices by people we didn't even know at the time, Beverly, okay? We didn't even know at the time we made the soul contract that could happen. But, all right? So that can happen throughout our lives. Now, here's the teaching point for us, Beverly, is that my advice is that if we want to be more powerful minds, what do? For me, my experience is meditate, turning within, doing something self-development, just fill in the blank. For me, it's meditation. For you, it might be something else self-development wise, but do something self-development wise that makes yourself more powerful. Then what you can do? Beverly and I our souls still remember this contract, okay, that we had like before we were born. We can still make it happen, but maybe it doesn't happen in elementary school, Beverly, because we can't control things to make, we can't control other minds, the corporate board directors that change their mind. Wait, we can't do that, all right, because that's their free will. We can't mess with people's free will. But we could make choices that creates a situation where we might meet later, years later, at an IANDS conference in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. But it wasn't elementary school, Beverly, right? Okay. Barbara, you have it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to. By the way, I've been listening the whole time. I just wasn't on visual. I finally figured out, oh yeah, click on that little icon. There you go. And then I'll be shown. Anyway, this is wonderful. I think you are absolutely fabulous. And I'm learning a lot. I just want to say that I was married for 29 years to a wonderful man who lived in England while I live here in California. And I did a regression years ago to find out what was the main purpose of our being together. Now, we had a wonderful relationship, so I wasn't questioning whether I should be in that relationship anyway. And we went through a whole lifetime that we had, the most previous lifetime in England. And by the way, a few years later, I actually found that house in England, and all the details from the regression showed up in person when I physically visited the house. But anyway, the point is that in the regression after the dying process, he had already died and then I died. And we went forward to making the agreement to come into this lifetime. And we decided, he and I, that he would be born first, and he was born 11 years earlier than I was. and that he would definitely be born in a different country than I was. So he in England, I in US, and that we would go well into our adult lives. And the main thing was that we would each have a chance to establish ourselves in our life work. And then we would meet and be able to carry on. And when we did meet, I was 50 and he was 61. So we were well established, each of us in our own continent, in our own professional work, which we could then continue on very happily. And so it was really interesting to see that soul contract that we had made, and how we actually were able to carry that out in this life. So that's just another example of the type of thing you're saying. But I do have a question. Now, I have heard from others during the years that when we're in that spirit realm, or whatever we want to call it, that afterlife, that we have the opportunity, if we want to stay at a certain level. Maybe I've heard that called the astral level. I don't know if that's true. And experience all the things that we want to experience very freely and happily. And then we also have the opportunity to sort of advance into higher and higher spiritual planes as we are spiritually developing there. Now, do you think there's truth to that?
So thank you for, first of all, thank you for sharing your experience that with everybody. That's awesome experience in terms of the past life regression that you had, and going to England and corroborating that externally. I call that external corroboration, right?
Yes.
You know, going to the house, so forth. I've had similar experiences like that with some of my past life stuff, and the connection with your husband. Is he still alive now or no?
No, not now.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Gone for about five or 6 years now.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but it sounded like a really cool connection that goes way back. That's very cool. How long ago? I'm just curious. How long ago was the English experience? You know, when he was 11 years younger than you. You know, the previous lifetime. What decade? I mean, what
Yes, that was that lifetime was at the end of the 1800s and early 1900s.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. Cool. Great example of how these choices that we can make as souls on the other side could be any number of choices. I mean, look at your example. I mean, 50 and 61 years old. Okay. You know, it's not necessarily immediately. So we just don't know. The point is that we can make any number of choices. So that goes to my point of one of my earlier principles I talked about. Like the other side is more like this side than than this side. There's more similarity between the two sides in that sense that, you know, you can make those choices, the same kind of choices on this side as you can make on the other side. You know, get together at different times, whatever. But, you know, you make that choice on the other side, you know, before birth even. So it's almost like a deferred getting together, right? For many decades, deferral. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So the question about levels and so forth and graduating and this whole thing, that's not my experience. Now, here's the thing though. When I say it's not my experience, let me just qualify this, okay? It's not my experience that there are structural levels on the other side. Is it my experience that there are beings on the other side who believe that there are structural levels on the other side? Yes. Those are two different things. Now, I don't know if that's a little bit confusing, but let me give you an example of what I mean by that.
Okay.
On this side, you can talk to some people. I guarantee you, there are human beings on planet Earth especially in the United States of America. I say that just because I know America, you know, it is probably true in some European countries too, but especially in the US, because I know America because I'm an American growing up here, but who believe that there are different levels in our society that you can graduate in. And one of the levels is high school to college, and then you graduate, and then you're at a certain level, and then you go to graduate school, and you go professional school, and then these levels, and if you talk to somebody who doesn't fully, like, for example, somebody who only graduated from 3rd or 4th grade, I'm just making something up. Somebody who's only graduated from 3rd or 4th grade might have a really firm belief that there are these different levels, and that they have not graduated from the level that they're in, and so forth. Because look at all the people around them. Oh, well, this person, blah, 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 and look at how it affects them. Oh, and they can, people get that, and they get a better job when they have this level and that level. Now, they may make an inaccurate assumption that everybody who has a college degree gets this 6-figure paying job, because that's the 6 people that they know. Yeah. They make this conclusion, right? And we know how false these conclusions are, but people make them all the time. Okay. Sure. And then let's say this person who only had graduated from 3rd grade, put some money in the stock market and hits it big and becomes a multi-gazillionaire. Now this person with a 3rd grade education all of a sudden becomes an icon of wisdom and knowledge in American culture. Why? Because now they're a billionaire, because they invented, and there are some people like this, and I'm not joking, who invented the certain washer or screw or certain element that goes into every toilet in the world. And I know this is true because I used to work for a firm that had an office in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I don't know if you guys know Florida, but there's an inland waterway there and so forth. And on the inland waterway, that's where all the $30-50 million yachts are. And so one of my firm's offices overlooked, like, out of my office, I could see there's a 30 million, that's a 50 million. I didn't know the numbers, but people would tell me, oh, that one's worth about 75 million. Oh, that small one over there is only about an $8 or $10 million yacht. It's like, and there would be like 20 of them right across the street from my office. Okay. All right. I know because one of the things that they do in the inland waterway there is they take you on a tour. You can actually pay as a tourist. You can go on a tour and they'll tell you, oh, see that house over there? That's where so-and-so lives. They're worth about this much money. And they invented the screw or the washer or the whatever that goes into every toilet. And they literally have a 4th or a 5th or 6th grade education. But they invented that, okay? Now they're seen as this pillar of wisdom. All right? And everybody goes to them and says, what's it like on planet Earth? What's it like? I want to write an article about it. They say, well, you need these levels. There's all these levels and all of that. Now, I'm an exception to the rule, but everybody else, there's levels and levels and levels. It's analogous on the other side. Okay. So to me, I don't see them as levels. Now, I happen to have gone to Dartmouth, Yale, and Boston College Law School. To me, they're just schools. To other people, it's like, whoa, you went to this school, that school. To me, it's like, it's what have you done for me lately? It's like, what have you accomplished in life? In other words, that's how I measure people, right? Yeah. I measure them. But a lot of people in the East Coast where I grew up, that's what it's all about, Very, very hierarchical, where you went to school, blue blood kind of mentality, Were you born with a silver spoon? No, I went to public high school, but I happened to end up going to those schools. So now I'm in those, I could be in those circles if I wanted to, but I never really wanted to. But, that's the thing, right? So then you have this certain filtration. And I think the filtration happens on the other side. That's another where I say, the other side is more like this side than we realize. the filtration is happening on the other side too. So why would somebody on the other side want, you might ask, for people on this side to be thinking, oh, it's all about graduation and you get to these ethereal levels and once you get to do this and you got to go to school on the other side and you graduate and all this stuff and whatever. You know, it's about importance. And I think that the souls on the other side, whether they've been physical humans before or not, we're all minds. And I think that this is unique or not, not unique, but there's this commonality of our minds where we have this importance of being important thing going on. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm more important because I went to this school or that school, or I'm more important because I'm graduated at this level. And when you get to my level, you know, you'll see what it's really like over here in the afterlife. But until you get to my level, you really don't see it. Now, they don't tell you that you can go right to that level if you want to on the other side. Oh. They make it sound like you got to jump through all these hoops first. And that's why, because that's going through the filter on the other side of the mind who created that notion. Because of why? Because of this thing that I call the importance of being important. It exists on the other side too. So I'm like the equalizer guy. I'm like, nah, this is like democracy, equalizer, democratic on the other side, democratic universe, democratic on the, it's like, you know, you can do what you want. You have free will. Go here, go there. You're not restricted from going into that area because you don't have the right diploma from the afterlife level, you know, to get into that level. You know, you don't have to have this, the certain password code to get past the bouncer that gets you into that club on the other side in the afterlife. No.
Okay. I have another question, if you don't mind. Anyway, thank you for that. I'm very interested in the idea, I think it's a reality, that we as ongoing, continuing souls have some incarnations, if we choose to, as what we would call extraterrestrial beings. And we are now obviously having a human incarnation, but could you say more about incarnations that we might have as extraterrestrial beings?
I can certainly talk about that from personal experience, but before I go there, I'm just curious, where did this gestate and how did it develop in your consciousness? Where did you get this idea from?
Well, primarily because as a psychotherapist, I've been doing a lot of regression therapy work with people since mid-1980s, but especially starting in 1991, I've done a lot of regressions to people's experiences, their encounters with extraterrestrial beings. They, of course, the people are here in this life as we are, but they've had many, many encounters with extraterrestrial beings. That's been sort of a specialty of mine for a number of years now. And so it's in that whole field of interest that it's come to my attention from some people that some of the clients I've actually worked with who have, in some regressions, not all, have gone back to experiencing a portion of a lifetime as an extraterrestrial that they were. And that's happened enough times that certainly brought my attention to that as a very likely possibility.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad I asked you because that's fascinating. That's very cool. Yeah. So the short answer is yes. We can choose to have lifetimes on other planets. I have memory of being on another planet and living on another planet and so forth. So the short answer is yes, we can make that choice. I think that most people, this is my theory, most people choose not to travel around to different worlds and have different lifetimes because we are beasts of familiarity. That's the way kind of, you know, we're familiarity, what's comfortable, you know, look at your own life. Each of us, you know, do you go to different supermarkets every week? You go to a different one? No, you probably go to the same one or the same 2 or 3. I go to Trader Joe's, and sometimes I go to Ralph's, and sometimes I go to Sprouts, but I go to pretty much the same ones because they don't all have what I want, but that's why I do it. Yeah. If they all had what I want, I probably would go to one store, and that's sure. It. It's just simple. It's easy. I know the route, and you know, I know the traffic flow and all that. We are beasts of familiarity. It's just the way it is. So I think that's why most people tend to come back to planet Earth over and over and over again, because we know what the air's like, the gravity, the money, all of that stuff is regular, normal, familiar to us, rather than going to another planet where the gravity is like 1/3, or it's like whatever, or the beings are completely completely structured differently. The bodies are different structures and so forth and so on. You got to get used to that again. I get that. You know, so yeah, why not just go back and the other thing is, another reason why, like you kind of alluded to already with your sharing with us your past life memory with your husband, another reason why we come back here is to be with other people like you, illustrated for us, and to be with other people. And so if you start, well, I really want to come back with those 50 people or those 100 people or whatever, it doesn't have to just be with one person. It could be like a group of people. The likelihood of you getting all 50 or 100 people to agree, well, let's go off and be in this other planet, do this thing. You start decreasing the probabilities, right? Getting together again. Right. So for all those reasons, I think that, most people tend to come back to Earth. But yes, we can go to anywhere. We can go anywhere. That's our free will. We can make any choice to go anywhere. And I've done it. Look, maybe this illustrates kind of something about my personality to you. This lifetime, I've lived in 7 countries, 28 cities.
Wow.
That's not moved to 28. That's lived in 28. So Los Angeles, I've lived in 3 times. It only counts as one of the 28. So I don't know how many times I've moved, 40, 50 times or something in my life. I'm okay with it. It doesn't, for a lot of people, it's number 1, number 2, number 3 on the stress list for most people moving, I don't,
certainly is. Right.
So
wow, anyway. You've had an amazing life.
Yeah, so far it continues to be amazing. Interesting at the very least, if not difficult and challenging at times, because we all go through that. I talk a little bit about that in my book, some of the challenging times, and it's just it's life is enriched by our ability, in my opinion, enriched by our ability to manage through life, because sometimes we grow from things and sometimes we just tolerate things, and other times we are kind of pushed down by things. We're not always uplifted by everything, and so, but that's life. But I think it enriches us as a being, and it enhances my experience, all the experiences I've had, good, bad, and indifferent,
Could I ask one more question? I feel like I'm really being a hog, being a total hog. But anyway, I'm so glad to have this opportunity. When we are in the afterlife realm, are we able to see or to recognize in the other souls, are we able to recognize those who are what we call extraterrestrial beings? In other words, they've been another kind of a being on a different planet. They died, they're now souls without the physical body. Is there some way that we can recognize them as being having had extraterrestrial incarnations?
Yeah, so I would say yes and no. So what do I mean by that? I would say that it would be, well, it depends. It depends on, so first of all, understand we're on the other side where minds, where consciousness is, okay? We don't have a physical biological body. So first of all, let's do a threshold issue first. Could that soul show us what they looked like last lifetime? They could do that, but that's a choice. That's a choice, okay? So just like Maharishi showed me what he looked like in 1970, 73, 74, 75, when I knew him. The last time I was physically with him, I think was 1976. 1976 was the last time I was physically in his presence with him. And so he shows me that. So could an extraterrestrial show you their body as an extraterrestrial being? Sure, they could choose to do that as an energy form. So I'm seeing a vibration, a vibratory energy form, just like Jesus showed after he died and came back 10 or 12 times after he died on the cross and was murdered. And so, so similarly, I saw Maharishi energy form, you know, not a physical biological body, but saw his biological body-ish as an energy vibration, okay? My daughter has seen my parents who predeceased her by, 12 years, and my mother predeceased my daughter by 12 years, and my father died after, when my daughter was 5 years old. So she knew my father, but she didn't know my mother. She saw both of them when she was 5 or 6 years old, and their vibration of their energy body. And she also saw my dog, my golden retriever, who had died 4 years before my daughter was born. She saw him sleeping on my feet, which is exactly, she didn't know where he normally slept, but that's exactly where he was sleeping. He sleep right on my feet. So she told us, you know, she woke up. Anyway, but that kind of energy, the extraterrestrial, could show you that. And of course, to them, they're not extraterrestrial, they're terrestrial. You know, we're the extraterrestrials to them. So,
right, yeah.
But,
yes.
but they could show you their body. That's possible. But here's the other thing. Let's say, just from a purely mental standpoint, they don't show you their body. Could you still identify them? The short answer is yes, if their mind is thinking slightly differently than what your mind is perceiving to be the way human minds think, okay? So could they be thinking differently and having different thoughts? And could you read their mind on the other side and identify that as different? Yes, you could.
Yeah, of course, they have total telepathic ability, as far as I understand. Most of us don't.
Well, it depends on which planet you're talking about. There are trillions of planets out there that are inhabited. Some of them are like Earth, where people are not really telepathic. Other planets out there are like, or where they're like everybody's telepathic. And then there are billions of other planets who are in between. So there's this huge range.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes,
it's been
welcome.
Really great.
Yeah, you're welcome. Very welcome. Any other questions? Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Norm.
Norm, yes.
Thank you, Kelvin and Beverly, for having this program today. This is my first time on any sort of near-death experience Zoom meeting, or even talking about it with anybody. I had a similar growing up as you, Kelvin. I grew up in suburban Boston. I was born in 1954. My parents spoke French, but they never taught it to us because English was to be, you know, the dominant language, and they weren't interested in teaching us French. I was a respiratory therapist for 40 years, and I experienced a lot of PTSD because I helped a lot of people. I was there when a lot of people, anything from a newborn to a senior citizen and everything in between. when they were having their near-death experiences, some of whom survived and some of who didn't. And so I wish I always feel like I was dropped off on the wrong planet, by the way, because I just don't have the same reaction to things that most people have. And I like I say, suffer from PTSD and depression. And I was just wondering, did you have any suggestions? I mean, I know that meditation is a good thing, but my mind is just so, gets so easily distracted. And I struggle a lot with any sort of meditation.
Yes, yes, yes. Where did you grow up in Massachusetts, by the way?
I grew up in Randolph. It's
okay.
I went to school in Braintree.
Yep.
To Archbishop Williams High School in Braintree.
Yep.
And I went to UMass Boston.
Okay, good.
I watched the Kennedy Library get built out there at Columbia Point.
Yes, I know exactly where you went to school. I've been out there, and I played basketball at Archbishop Williams, and I played in South Braintree High, and I grew up in Norwood, so I was on the high school basketball team. So we played Randolph, blah blah blah. Played that whole area. Played basketball in all those schools. Yeah.
All world.
Yeah, yeah. And so here's the thing: PTSD, anxiety, and so forth, and meditation. So key distinction between what I teach and what you've probably dabbled in before in terms of trying to meditate is it's very, very easy what I teach. So it's no focusing on the breath. It's different from mindfulness. It's different from any kind of Buddhist meditation or Vipassana or this. I've taught north of 5,000 people. I stopped counting thousands of people ago, but I've taught people who've done every other kind of meditation, and they all say that when they learn what I teach, it's so much easier. And so we should have a private conversation offline, and I can talk to you about some of the PTSD experience and so forth. And I teach vets come back from Iraq, Afghanistan. I've taught active duty. I taught in Korea on all the Army bases, and taught at West Point Military Academy and so forth and so on in New York. So a lot of PTSD for various reasons. Not just war, but other reasons too, like you're describing. I've taught police officers, for example, PTSD, police officers dealing with the stress of their job, et cetera, in Houston, Texas, et cetera. I taught a bunch of police officers. So it's very easy, and it's very, very, there's power in simplicity. I think our world, our planet, our culture, especially in America, gets caught up in this complexity thing. Oh, the more complex it is, the better it is. Well, that's true. We have complex problems sometimes that require complex solutions. That's true. But things that work naturally in nature, that are as natural as possible, tend to be extremely powerful, like tidal wave, like waves, for example. Like nature is extremely powerful. The way I teach the meditation works in the natural flow of the mind without resisting the thinking process, and therefore creates an incredibly powerful effect because of how natural it is in the flow of the mind. You'll see if you take my class. It's so the resistive type of meditations that you've probably dabbled in, that's why they're difficult. And when they when they're resisting the natural tendency of the mind to wander and to think stuff, which is exactly what everybody's mind does. So instead, why not fight that? And why not use that energy that is, in fact, making our mind go here and there and all of that, use that to feed and fuel the meditation technique. That's why what I teach is so easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we could have an offline conversation more about this if you like.
Okay. I'll need to get your information, either email or phone number. And do you even live in San Diego, or?
I live in
Los
Angeles. So I teach. Okay. I teach worldwide on Zoom, just like this. This is how I teach. Okay. I've been teaching like this for 10 years. So long before the COVID thing, I've been teaching like this for 10 years on internationally like this, so I don't have to get on airplanes. So yeah, just go to kelvinchin.org, Norm. Go to Kelvin Chin, just my name, KELVINCHIN.org. And then send me a message on the contact page, and that way you can reach me. Or you can friend me on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook too, either way.
Great, thank
okay?
you.
And then, yeah, and then the easiest way to navigate I have 4 different websites. You go to the bottom of any page on any website, and you can navigate to the other 3 because there's links, there's hot links you just click on to get to the other 3 websites. I have a book website. My second book is coming out in March. And then I have my meditation website called Turning Within. And then I have my Overcoming the Fear of Death website that helps people with that, obviously. My Kelvin Chin website, kelvinchin.org, is my more spiritually oriented website. Okay?
Great. Thank you.
Good. We'll talk soon. Anything else? Any other questions?
Kelvin, I would like to thank you a lot for sharing your time with us this afternoon. And we had a very interesting conversation today. And I would like to have Kelvin back in January to speak about reincarnation, which would be a totally different talk for today. And I invite anyone who's here or who listens to this afterwards to join us in the other conversation.
Yeah, that's great, Beverly. Thank you for having me today. Yes, we can talk in January. I'll talk about reincarnation, and I'll also give you tips on how you might be able to open yourself up if you're curious to open up yourself to your own past lives. You may not be interested in it. That's okay too. There's no need to understand or know our past lives. To me, it's all about living in the present. For me, as Kelvin Chin, even though I have all these memories that go back, it's about living in the present as Kelvin Chin right now. So I draw from those experiences to inform me more about who I am, but I can give you some tips, and we'll talk more about how that can unfold potentially when we talk in January. The other thing, Beverly, I wanted to mention is when you go on my kelvinchin.org website, you'll see on the programs tab there's a description of a 6-part Afterlife series that I teach. It's 6 parts. It's every other Sunday. My next one is starting January 3rd, and it goes for 12 weeks. So it's every other week. So it's 6-part series. And if you go to the kelvinchin.org website on the programs page, there's a 20-minute video there where I describe what I talk about in the 6-part series. So it's like a preview of the 6-part series. So you can just go there and watch it and see if it interests you. I talk more about a lot of the subjects that we kind of touched upon today in the 6-part series. So feel free to check that out if you're curious.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Kelvin.
Very welcome, Beverly. Yes. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. This is Rosary, and I'll be getting in touch with you too, because I have anxiety issues with Parkinson's and I need help.
Oh, good. Yeah, I can help you with that for sure. I have clients with Parkinson's. I'm so sorry to hear that, but yeah, feel free to get in touch with me, and we'll have a private conversation, and we'll help figure that out for you.
Thank you.
Where did you say you're located, Kelvin?
I'm in Hawthorne, California, in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, okay.
But yeah, I teach virtually through phone and Zoom now. That's my
Zoom is great.
Yeah. Oh, I hope to get back on airplanes and fly around, the world, again, maybe next year. We'll see. We'll see. When the world is ready again, open up more.
I hope so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We all hope for a better year coming up. It's been a challenge in more ways than one.
Exactly.
It's wonderful that we do have a tool, this Zoom. We can still have these meetings, and it's been a pleasure. Okay.
Great.
Many thanks. This is wonderful.
Thanks for all your questions, Barbara. Great questions, and thank you for sharing. that wonderful experience of yours and your husband's. It was a beautiful experience.
Bye-bye, Beverly.
Okay.
We'll see you, Beverly.
Thank you, Beverly, for putting this on.
Okay. Thank you.
See you next month.
See you next month. Exactly. See you next month.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.